Well, 4 days, 9 hours more. That's what's left. But this afternoon, government's push to restructure its debt has reached a crucial state with just 4 days to the third and possibly the final deadline for eligible institutions and individuals to sign onto the deal. This afternoon, Joy News is learning a third major group has signed onto that domestic debt exchange program. The Bankers Association, Insurance Association, and the latest being the Securities Association have all signed on. The prospects are bright now from government's perspective, but there remains a little dialogue to be had with the individual bondholders who continue to oppose their inclusion. They are due to meet with the finance minister this afternoon in a push in the next few hours to be exempt. Will government now yield to the pressure and exclude the individual bondholders? That's the question we are asking, and of course we'll find out later on the show. But for now, I want to bring in Isaac Ofieche, who's data analyst with our Joy Research Desk. We also have lawyer Martin Pebu, who's been with the individual bondholders all throughout. He's part of the forum that's making this push and asking government to exempt individual bond holders. Before this, just listen to investment banker Kweku Adobolu, who shared an idea about how things will pan out in the last few days. But just before we get that as well, I want to welcome Isaac Ofieche, who's with us. Isaac, it's good to see you. Just about 4 days, 96 hours more, and we'll get into the dynamics of this. Lawyer Martin Pebu is also on with us. Counsel, it's a great pleasure to be speaking with you hours to that meeting that you'll be having with the finance minister today. Do you believe that you'd be able to secure that demand that you have to be excluded? And what can you say about the processes leading to today's final dialogue with the finance minister?
Mr. Soga, it's the case that the finance minister is most likely to exempt individual bondholders, because if you look at the context within which he formed the technical committee, it was that we should go into the committee sittings and show which projects we think government should suspend for this fiscal year in order to create room for the exemption of individual bondholders. You see, so that was the context. The finance minister said, okay, guys, go into the meeting and give concrete, specific examples of the projects that should be suspended. And that is what we went and did in the committee meetings, and you see we came out with there's a savings of about 83 billion. Of course, some of those savings are supposed to be revenue that government can generate. So in terms of cutting the expenditure and raising revenue in certain areas that government has not paid enough attention, we've seen that we can possibly get 83 billion. And so even assuming we're to say that not all of the 83 billion can be realized within a year, no matter how you discount it, at least you'll be able to get 20 billion minimum. 20 out of this 83 billion will be realizable this fiscal year. So I believe that with this excellent document we've given the finance minister, we should be exempted.
Finance minister, of course, making a U-turn on the zero-rated coupon for 2023. Some say that's likely to be your fate as individual bondholders. Is that enough compromise for you? And would you sign on if that's the option on the table?
Mr. Soga, can you repeat again? Which compromise? Which bond?
The government initially told us that for the whole of 2023, there'll be a zero-rated coupon. Of course, the finance minister is making a U-turn now to say, well, we'll revise that to some 5%. And that's the deal that was reached between the banks, correct, Isaac, and the other institutions. I'm just asking if, as individual bondholders, if government says, well, I'm not able to grant all of your desires, I can only do this by revising the rates for you, will you compromise to that 5% for this year?
Absolutely not, Mr. Soga. We will not compromise. And also, you see, that suggestion for now, for lack of a better word, let's say it looks odd. I'm trying to choose a very diplomatic word. It will look odd because, Mr. Soga, so why would the finance minister send us into a technical committee meeting to go suggest ways of cutting expenditure, only for him to come back and offer 5%. You see the logic?
Yeah, but I'm asking because we're not sure of what the outcome will be, and that's perhaps why I'm asking to what extent you'll be willing to compromise. Is it a no-no for you, total exemption, or nothing else?
Yes, 100% exemption or nothing else. And I believe, hopefully, we should make it. We should make it because it would be, as I said, very odd that he would have set up a committee to look at how to cut expenditure and raise revenue and then come up with 5%. Because, Mr. Suga, if he was to come up with 5%, then it means that we are going to open another round of negotiations. And so it means that what we would have done or what we did at the committee would have been useless. So it doesn't add up. You see the context. Then it means that we're just sent to the committee on a wild goose chase. That's not how things are done. So because of that, I don't want to believe that we'll be offered 5% or 10% or any other percentage for this year.
Council, did you serve on that technical committee?
Yes, I was in there.
Okay, and that's why I'm interested in this conversation. What practical steps or alternatives do you place before government, which gives you the confidence that indeed, if your proposals are considered, individual bondholders will be exempt?
Great. So let's go to the expenditure side, since that one is easier. It's easier to cut expenditure than to raise revenue. So the expenditure cuts we propose, there are a number of them. Let me run through the big ticket items. Number one, you will see that we are going to spend over 5 billion on capital expenditure. That's the local component, which is not oil revenue. So let's explain this way. When you go to the capital expenditure of 27 billion, about 16 billion of it is coming from foreign sources. Foreign sources, they are not donor funds. It's not for free. So from foreign sources, 16 billion of it. Then the remainder of it, some other billions are from the oil revenue that we get. The law says we should use the oil revenue, part of it, for capital expenditure. Then apart from that, there's a third item, which is non-oil revenue, which will be used for capital expenditure. That one is 5-point-something billion. So we ask that one be cut in half by 50%. So minimum, you are getting about 2.7 billion there. So that's one ticket. Then you go on. We are looking at the free SHS. It's been said that government should review. When you review, at least we may make about 1 billion there. Currently, we spend 2.5 billion on free SHS. When we review and ask parents who can pay to pay, then we'll fund those who are poor. We are likely to reduce it by about 1 billion.
That's a very controversial area. I'm sorry for cutting through, but that will be a very controversial one, isn't it? The president has made his position clear on that policy. Are you hopeful that government will be willing to touch it, knowing very well what the political cost may be?
Excellent, Mr. Soga. And I am an ardent supporter of free SHS. I'm self-appointed ambassador. I fully understand what you're saying. So that's why it's a proposal. Remember, we are talking about 83 billion. So government may choose to keep free SHS intact and go for the other one. So I'm coming to another big item. Actually, I should have mentioned it before free SHS. When you look in the budget, we intend to spend about 23 billion paying some debts in the energy sector. Yes, you heard me, 23 billion. The energy shortfalls, right? So we are going to pay some debts there. So we think that government can renegotiate so that we'll make some savings there. Don't pay all the 23 billion within 1 year. I don't even remember the last time we paid so much within 1 year. So we should renegotiate so that the payments will come down. And also, there's some energy sector reforms that are to make ECG and all the other companies more efficient. So government should hurry up with that project so that we can reduce the transmission losses, the technical losses, and etc. So that place is huge, Mr. Soga. It's a huge area, 23 billion. When we do what has to be done, minimum we'll make about 5 billion there. You say, yes. Then also you are looking at some of the oil blocks. You see the Acre Energy one. Yes, so that is an example of an item that cannot be done this year. We can't finish within 1 year. So we are telling government to close that particular transaction, finish up, so that we can make some savings. Because when we make revenue from that block, it will bring in a lot of money. Hold on a second. Okay, so that's it on that one. So there are a whole lot of items. You see, I'm still in court and trying to haggle other things and run to the
so we'll keep it really short. I see the picture there. So finally, the point about the meeting that's happening in a few hours, I guess, from now with the finance minister. What will happen if the finance minister gives less of your expectation?
Mr. Sogan, our instructions are to reject same. Yes, very firm instructions. What we put on the table, which the finance minister appeared to have accepted, and for which reason he set up the committee, was that we want 100% exemption. And you remember in your intro, you mentioned that now 3 major groups have come on board. The banks, the insurance companies, and then the third one today. Which one is that?
The securities.
Very good. So, so it means that hopefully they are going above 50%. And so if you look at the other ones, another group that holds a significant shareholding is the foreign investors. There are some 2 groups that have 9% each. So there's still a lot of room. I believe the finance minister will be able to get a lot more coming on board in terms of the institutional investors, the foreign investors. You know, there are some foreign investors who bought these bonds. So though they are foreign, they are part of the domestic exchange, this current program. Yes. So there's a lot of room.
But in the event that we have the less likely option happening, you're heading to court.
What we'll do, yes, court is one of the options, but we will not go there immediately. What we'll do is that, you know, we have sent letters to Tunfor Tutu. We've asked him to also come and mediate. Yesterday we met Togbe Afede. We've asked him to mediate, put in a word for us. Next Tuesday, we'll be meeting the Christian Council. We also have letters before the Council of State. So if it doesn't work, I believe they will invite us and so many other groups. So we want to exhaust the mediation. You see, even the Bible says that when you are going to court and then your brother asks you to, you know, settle before you go to court, you should agree. So once we still have a lot of mediators and people who can come in to put in a word to resolve this matter, we want to exhaust the mediation before we go to court.
Well, we'll be keeping our eyes on the finance ministry, but for now, Lawyer Martin Pebu, we're grateful that you've been able to.
You're welcome.
But I'm sure you'll be part of that meeting, I guess.
Yes, yes, I'm just going there. I'm on my way.
Right.
Yes, it starts at 3:30. So, yes.
Anyway, so that's just about 10 minutes from now. We wish you all the best, Lawyer Martin Pebu, speaking to us there. We're still, of course, watching that space and keeping our eyes on the finance ministry for you, as in when the finance minister has a clear outline and update on that domestic debt exchange program, we'll bring that to you. But for now, Isaac Kofi is with us, and Lawyer Martin Pebu talking about 3 significant stakeholders joining the domestic debt exchange program. That's representing way over 60% of what government is seeking to do with the domestic debt exchange program. The finance minister says his target is 80%, which means that if you have all these 3 on board, you are way closer to your target. So you could, of course, give some chance to the individual bondholders.
If you have 4 days more, and if you discount, you know, weekends out, government has less than 3 days more to complete this deal. And this is a very significant news for the government. We have 3, significant entities coming on board to say they are at the negotiation table. They are willing and ready to, form part of this whole debt exchange program. But if you look at the bigger, picture where government has just 4
days, 96 hours. So that's in terms of the net number of hours we
left.
have. Or
if you take away weekends, this is way less than what we have here.
Oh,
so government will be racing against time. It has about just 3 or 2 days.
2 working days.
Absolutely, 2 working days to make sure that they have the 80% target that they are looking for. So we have first, the Bankers Association coming on board to say that they are willing to be part. Insurers also giving their consent, and then we also have the securities also coming on board. Mind you, these securities that we just heard today that they are part of the debt exchange, they are supposed to be the registrars, the managers and the fund managers, the brokers who actually coordinate this whole security space that we are talking about. But the target is around 137 billion worth of bonds that government wants to exchange this year, and the target is 80%. But there's actually an argument being made by the individual bondholders that if you look at the cake, or the bonds or the debt that government wants to restructure, and looking at the target of 80%, if you have these 3 entities coming on board, then it is enough to actually reach the target of 80. If you look at individual bondholders, they comprise about 11% of the entire chart. And so if your target is 80%, individual bondholders 11%, you still will have a surplus of about 9% to deal with. And I'm sure this 9%, that's where you have the pension funds and other things in there. So if your target is 80%, the individual bondholders are making a very concrete statement that since you have the consent of bankers, you have the consent of insurers, and then also securities, then we believe and we feel that you can take us out of this whole exercise and you still be able to achieve 80%.
And I guess in this next slide, you'll be giving us a picture of what's happening here. So these are the 3 groups that we're talking about.
Yeah.
The first cleared, second cleared, the latest one being the securities industry. Of course, big breakthrough for the finance ministry. If you're putting all of this together, we're expecting that will definitely exceed the target of the finance ministry by some 9%.
Some 9%.
Yeah.
Looking at the charts.
But we don't want to add the individual bondholders.
Not at all.
So
because they want 100%.
You don't want to break their hearts at this point. So we wish them all the best. But I'm not sure what the finance minister, will be saying about this. So 3 categories out. Individual bondholders still pending because no deal has been reached yet. We're expecting that at least an official communique will be out even before the announcement by the finance ministry. They're keeping that under wraps. So there may be a surprise element. But let's look at the picture and why we believe that, for instance, government has exceeded its target and could go ahead with the domestic debt exchange.
Of course, if you look at the analysis made by the individual bondholders, they say that if you look at government's target of 80%, they believe that they comprise just 11% of the entire space, with about 9% being surplus if you exclude government's target. So if your target is 80%, then there's no need for you to include individual bondholders who are just 11%, because they believe that if you take it out, there's still a 9% an area that you can still explore. But in this area, I'm sure you have the pension funds and other funds also in there.
And part of that has been giving an exemption now, at least based on what the finance minister said.
So,
but if you take the 3 key stakeholders, the banks accumulatively are dealing with about 60% of this domestic debt target that the finance ministry
they hold a lot of security as far as this. If you look at the ESLA bonds, Dache bonds, and other things, if you combine banks, their securities in this whole space is around 90 billion Ghana cedis that we're talking about. So with they giving their consent, it's a very, very good news, significant news for government.
Great step for government.
Exactly, in reaching that 137 billion that government wants to restructure. But mind you that they came to this agreement based on certain conditions.
And so those conditions would have to be met by
they want government to meet certain conditions.
And government is giving us an indication that they're starting off with the zero-rated coupon for this year, revising that to 5%. What would be the implication for the banks as well? And why would they be asking and insisting that, well, we need that return on investment?
This would be a good cushion for them, a good cushion for banks, because they couldn't wrap their heads around it. Getting 0% in 2023, the entire year, you're not going to get anything on your securities that you have with government. So government promising you, or government saying, I will play my part of the bargain, I'm going to give you 5%. so just roll onto the program. They feel it is good because 5% for 2023, they're going to get an additional 5% 2024, then they'll start getting 9% and possibly it will diminish to 8% when we enter the 2030s. But if you look at this whole debt exchange program, it's going to take a span of 15 years. And within this 15 years, Ghana would have had about 4 elections. It's going to be a long time. Very long time. So they are anticipating all these losses. And the government is also promising them that...
changing policies.
Absolutely. Government is promising them that we see, some losses ahead. That's why we're going to give you a 2% tender fee. The tender fee is more or less like a cushion. Government is saying that, we anticipate that you're going to experience some loss. So we're going to cushion you with 2% of your principal, and that's going to be paid into your account.
What difference would it have made if we have this category of individuals, 11%, added onto this 80% required for the domestic debt exchange? That would have made it 91%. Why is the finance ministry, or by extension government, insistent on having that fund with them?
If you look at individual bondholders, they are total securities with the government. Natural persons, and then also natural persons with securities with, collective schemes. It's around 15.5 billion. So it looks really cool. Yeah, it looks very bright. It's a good area that government will sincerely want to look into if you really want to restructure your debt. But the key question is, how does government, cut down on expenditure in 2023? They want to make sure that they get that fiscal space to do other things, to get that fiscal space to accommodate the $3 billion IMF bill. You know that government wants to reach a certain debt to GDP ratio of 50% by 2028. This is the steps that government wants to take. All these indicators that we're talking about will actually pan out well if government is able to make sure that the debt restructuring exercise really goes on well. And so they wouldn't want to lose any billion, they wouldn't want to lose any CD. And so if it's around 15.5 billion, then government is looking at this huge money and saying that if I want to restructure my debt, then I need to touch a portion of this, this security that we're talking about. But they've also made, concrete and solid points that your target is 80%. You want to call this successful when you reach a target of 80%. We've done the analysis for you. We've had a technical committee, and we've been able to give you alternatives. Look, if you look at your capital expenditure for 2023, it's around 25 billion.
Why not split it into half?
Absolutely. If you look at your flagship program, it's going to cost you about 10 or 9 billion. Why don't you cut down? If you look at your size of government, so they've given government so many alternatives, saying that if it's indeed your deficit, if it's indeed the financial space, the fiscal space that you need, then there are some, alternatives that we are actually proposing to you that if you're able to do that, you wouldn't mind taking us out of this whole entire exchange.
Do you see the total exemption by the end of the engagements today?
Well, looking at what government's actually doing, mind you, if government's saying they're going to give investors 5% in 2023, it means that it's truncating a certain portion that government would have saved in 2023. So they want to spread this. Spreading this, I do not know
require more room.
Exactly.
And that's why they're targeting and eyeing this 11%.
So maybe a 100% exemption. I don't know if the Ministry of Finance will agree to 100%. But I feel maybe they will come with favorable terms that probably will be so hard for the individual bondholders.
The technical committee is out with their report on that. We wait to see what the finance minister will decide. Isaac Ovieje with our research desk. Former President John Mahama has also been speaking on the domestic debt exchange program at a lecture, which is, of course, just ended a couple of hours ago in the United Kingdom. He's been speaking to UK-based Chatham House, where he accused government of demonstrating little interest in cutting down on expenditure in a period of severe economic crisis.
I will mark 66 years of nationhood. Far from being an occasion to celebrate independence and the successes and achievements of nationhood, we will mark this day under the yoke of the worst economic situation arguably in our history. We're currently bankrupt and burdened with a national debt we are simply unable to pay. You may have learned over the past weeks that the Ghanaian government has defaulted on servicing of both external and domestic debt. There's currently a huge uproar over a controversial debt restructuring program under which the middle class of Ghana could be wiped out if plans to have them forfeit proceeds of government bonds on which they rely for investment and sustenance are followed through. In absolute terms, up to about 6 million people could be deprived of their life savings and investments. Ghana's banking and financial sector could also be under threat of insolvency if no suitable adjustments are made to the debt restructuring plan. Our present economic situation, underscored by our bankrupt status, sharply contrasts with our fortunes over a little over a decade ago. At the time, our economy posted some of the highest growth rates in the world, with a robust and fast-growing non-oil sector. Too many of our economic indicators today are pointing south. We have in the last month entered the hyperinflation era with an inflation rate of 54%. Our currency has in the past few months been counted amongst the worst performing in the world, plummeting by as much as 54% in value within the first 10 months of 2022. Widening budget deficits have characterized economic performance since 2018. A severe cost of living crisis fueled by ever-rising prices of basic goods has imposed extreme hardship on Ghanaians as the government struggles to meet some of its most basic commitments in areas like education and health. Unemployment stood at a staggering 13%, the highest in recent memory. It will be no hyperbole to assert that our present state bears an uncanny resemblance to the period of the late 70s and 80s. How was a country with such bright prospects only a decade ago brought to its knees so quickly when it should have made far more progress? The present trouble with our economy stems from gross mismanagement and in some instances sheer recklessness. Government failed to sustain the gains made after our last IMF program, which brought stability into the management of the Ghanaian economy. Corruption has also contributed significantly to bringing us to this distressing juncture. Government has been quick to pass off the COVID pandemic as a reason for this poor economic record. Yet available data shows that many of our neighbors in West Africa and further afield posted much better economic performances than we did during and after the pandemic. The World Bank, through its Ghana Country Director, has also stated unequivocally that Ghana's economy was already in distress before the pandemic occurred. The purpose of recounting these failures, driven by mismanagement and corruption in Ghana, is to demonstrate how Africa depletes its scarce resources generated from both the continent and development partners.